yesterday. Guys, Jay, I don't know if you were there, but I know Tony and Jackie definitely were. So my name's Ellen Goodwin. I'm Infrastructure Manager at New Anglia LEP, and we are hosting a series of webinars over the next fortnight, or this week and next, focused on all things net zero. These are being funded by the UK government's Community Renewal Fund. And today we've got Andy and Mike presenting from AMS Business Consultants, I think is your official title. So I'm not going to say anything other than welcome, and I'll pass over to you guys.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Ellen. I don't worry, guys. A bit of zoomy. If you get cut off or you lose connection, don't worry, just come back. We're all friends here. I think we're all getting used to that now. So I do have a few slides that we're going to go run through, but I don't want it to be death by PowerPoint. So whilst I'm going to share the screen in a second, please feel free to be noisy. Unless you're literally are in a construction site, Tony, that's a bit much. But please feel free to sit off mute and interrupt, jump in. I really want the session to be as interactive as possible and discussion based, not Andy going through some slides because that's really not what we're here to do. So I'm going to wrap up. Oh, actually, before I do that, let's introduce ourselves properly. So I'm Andy. I run AMS Business Consultants. Company I set up when did I set it up, Mike? I've forgotten. 2020, April 2020, just before the pandemic, because that's a really, really sensible time to do it, anyone, if you think that starting a business is a good thing to do. And we are Lean and Six Sigma specialists. And sometimes people haven't heard of that and go, some people have heard of it. And I was really keen that we supported the net zero agenda and support packages with the Growth Hub to take a proactive and process focus on reducing the carbon footprint. Hence, that's some of the approach we're going to talk about today and talk through some examples and case studies of where businesses have been able to achieve a reduction in carbon footprint, but actually by being more efficient and increase productivity at the same time, because in reality, the two go hand in hand. And for those that haven't heard of Lean and Six Sigma, I saw some sort of shakes and nods of the head, so I'll keep it very, very simple. Lean, essentially, eliminating waste from a business, saving money, cutting costs, simple as that. There's lots of tools and ways of doing it, but in a nutshell, that's what it's designed to do. Six Sigma, increase quality and consistency in process performance. I can't speak. Again, lots of methodologies, but ultimately that's the desired output, an increase of quality. So I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. You can laugh and yeah, I've had it all over the years. I'm not offended anymore. There's not many of me in the UK, which is partly why I saw the opportunity to set this business up and make the skill set accessible and affordable to SMEs. People I've met over the years either think that it's an extremely expensive commodity, a corporate luxury, which shouldn't be the case. And that, those that have heard of it think that, and those that haven't heard of it don't really understand what it can do. The reality is every business, regardless of size, industry, sector, has processes. Whether you like it or not, it's a bit like insurance. They're not sexy, but you've got them and you need them. So what we do is work with businesses, business owners and their teams to make sure they have the most efficient and effective processes, from sales processes, HR, all the way through production. Process is a process in our world. We don't want to or pretend to be sector or industry experts. You are. We are the process experts and probably ask you lots of awkward questions about your business. I wish you hadn't asked that one, but that's what we're there for. We're not here to judge. We're here to get the best out of your business. Just very briefly, my background, having said that, is financial services, which is extremely boring. So Lean Six Sigma and financial services could be the most boring combination ever potentially, but it's not. We can make it exciting. So Mike, it'd be really good if you could just do a quick intro and then we'll crack on.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like Andy, I'm an independent business consultant. I've got my own business, MKR Solutions, based down in North Essex, but I'm working on this project as a provider with Andy. Again, like Andy, come from a financial services background, and I think that's probably why we have a similar mindset, the way we approach work. I set my consultancy up in mid 2018, so a little earlier than Andy, but not really significantly. As I said, I was financial services background and also run a few of my own businesses at various different times through my career. you know, felt I had something to give back to businesses. And interestingly, as Andy said, I'd never actually formalized my qualifications as a Lean Six Sigma specialist. But actually, when I sat down and spoke to Andy, found I'd been doing it for my corporate life anyway, pretty much. So formalized that qualification with Andy's help, and went through one of his courses, effectively, really good, and just formalized what I knew and what I believed in anyway. So yeah, I guess that's all I need to say, really. I don't think there's much else for me to say, really, apart from us. We'll crack on.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. For those that have just joined, welcome. I'm not going to introduce myself again. You can watch it back and watch the recording. There you go. But please feel free to come off mute and contribute. I want this to be an interactive session, not a sitting and listening to us drone at you. Really want questions, and hopefully you guys have got some input and ideas to share with each other as well. That's the idea. So I am just going to very briefly share my screen. I can't speak. Blah, 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 blah. Please just give us a thumbs up when you can see that. Okay, I can't see everybody, but I'll try and do. We do a lot on Zoom, believe it or not, so we should be fairly well facilitated. So what we really want to just talk about today and encourage is thinking differently about net zero. And we all know, you know, if I was to go around the room, and I know we've got some sustainability experts in here, so no pressure on us to do a fantastic job. But typically the clients that we experience, their instant go-tos are solar power, heat pump exchanges, air pump solutions, electric vehicles. And they're all really good things, by the way. Sorry, I'm saying that like they're all really good things and are super important. But actually what we challenge them to do is great. Okay, as an example here, you're using 100,000 kilowatts of energy. Why are you using it? Do you actually need to be using that energy in the first place? And for that 100,000 kilowatts of energy that you're using, are you getting the most out of it? Once you understand that element of the business and your performance, then look at the alternative solutions to sourcing that energy. And we've had some real success stories with that approach. And essentially that is the Lean and Six Sigma methodology being applied to those businesses when I talk about proactively. So I really want to talk about that, explore that, share some of the case studies without giving anything confidential away. And he said this afternoon, are we afternoon? That afternoon now. And then just have some discussion around it, and also potential opportunities that you might be thinking for either clients of yours or yourselves as we go through those discussions, and really get people thinking differently, as well as some of the traditional thought processes behind how you can achieve that carbon footprint reduction in the business. I'm going to send these slides out, so I'm not a fan of slides, even though I've produced them. So, but ultimately, you know, really, I think for me, this was probably covered in some of the webinars earlier this week. I think, you know, what can you do about it is do something. It's kind of the message for me. I know Ellen and I have spoken about this a lot. You know, actually sometimes just taking the first step and small steps, you might not necessarily achieve what your end goal is, but you will achieve something further forward. So this is going to be fun now because I can't see my slides because I can see half the screen and half of the thing. So a couple of case studies. First, essentially the next few slides are simple case studies that I just want to talk through. So as I say, please come off mute, jump in, interrupt. So one of the first case that I just want to talk through was a company that produces, I've called them print production because I didn't know how else to classify them, but essentially they print and brand cups, bottles, marketing materials, etc., etc. And our original request was exactly that. How can we produce energy via solar power? Essentially, that was their request in terms of the consultancy they were after to deliver. And upon actually talking to them and asking some, well, what I would consider to be some very straightforward questions is, okay, brilliant. How much energy do you use? First point, I don't know if you guys come across this, how many businesses that don't know how much energy they're using or unable to measure it or quantify it in the first instance. So I'm going to get a bit of a shameless pun in here, a plug-in, sorry, not pun. Next Wednesday, I'm doing a session on how to actually begin that data collection and actually how to develop a data collection plan, which is a bit more involved and a bit more of a trainee type session rather than interactive session that I'd like this to be. But there you go. Please come along. But essentially the starting point, start measuring. And if you're not sure where to start, ask people. One of the things that frustrates the living daylights out of me at the moment, and I do get quite passionate about this, is we can't measure our energy because that's part of our tenancy agreement. That is not an excuse. That is not an excuse whatsoever. That's just, for me, that just kind of shows the responsibility. Talk to your landlords, landladies, land peoples. They will be able to measure it. They'll be able to tell you. I've done some work recently with a site in Ipswich, which is called microsites, which, for those of you that might know that space, essentially it's an open space that rents out small stalls, if I call them that, to startup businesses, new businesses, £100 a week, sometimes less, depending on the. They have had meters installed in every single stand. So even as startup businesses, and I think it's great because they're really bringing to life and demonstrating and living and breathing what we want to achieve in terms of, even in those small stands that cost £100 a month, the utilities cost is covered in the rent. But what they've got those startup businesses thinking about is their impact on their carbon footprint, even though it may be even minuscule. So they're beginning to think about it. Anyway, sorry, off on a tangent. So back to the case study. Before this business even should be considering alternative ways of sourcing their energy, they need to understand what they're using. This particular business has had 4 electrical powered kilns to cook. I don't even know if that's the right terminology. Cook, bake a cup. What do you do with it? I don't know. Put it through a very hot machine so that the ink cures to the product. Very simple questions for me. How many cups do you produce a day or cook a day? They didn't know. What's the optimal production a day? So if you don't, how many are you doing? How many cups can a single kiln process a day? They didn't know. Actually, do you know what? They did know. They had such a wealth of data within the business, but they just weren't using it. So taking them through the approach that we apply and used, they removed 2 kilns. So again, initial interaction, oh, Andy, how can we produce the same amount of energy, please, using solar power or alternative solutions? They don't need to. They need to produce half the amount of power, full stop. That's quite a, so I'm not going to give away any numbers there. You can probably guess that's quite an expense that they've saved, let alone the increase in productivity that comes with it. In addition to that, they've now got a wealth of understanding and data around what their cost per unit measurements are, what their capacity is for growth. And the more kind of alarming element for me is they were really proud when we started talking to them about, oh, we don't recycle any cups. We don't have any recycling. We don't waste anything. We reclaim everything. And what that actually meant was, rather than a single cup going through an oven once correctly without any print defect, on average, they were doing it 11 times. So not only in reality, we've kind of only got halfway there. So not only in reality have they reduced the number of kilns required to 2, actually, when they improve that right first time measurement, that's going to probably half again. So for a business that has had 4 kilns processing, within 12 months they could be down to 1 for the level of output they produce right now. So we're not looking to kind of shrink the business down, but to demonstrate, guys, this is how you could be much more energy efficient before you even think about investment in solar powers, etc., etc. So that's why I put this one first, because for me this was a really powerful. They are going to install solar powered solutions and look at heat distribution for heating solutions, etc., as well, and they have a lot of capital to invest. So it's great that they're thinking about it, but I think and it was a bit of a shock to the business owner when I unearthed some of these things for them as well. So a really great example of, think about your processes, what you're doing. You can probably save it, well, you can significantly reduce your carbon footprint, but also reduce your operational costs and increase your productivities and efficiencies at the same time. There you go. Mic drop, done. Shall we close? No, we've got some more. So we've got some more case studies which are very, not the same, but taking a similar approach to challenge the businesses. As I said, guys, please feel free to come off mute, ask questions. I'm not going to name any businesses. I'm not going to give any numbers away, I'm afraid, much as you might like me to. Not happening. I'll get shot. But we're going to talk through some case studies here. And again, there seems to be a typical conception or misconception, in my opinion, that certain industries and certain sectors are easier or more difficult to achieve carbon footprint reductions. Nonsense. So just to prove that one, screen's not changing. There we go. Boom. One of the other clients I've been working with, and these are real pictures. So if you do know this campsite, please don't name them. This one's a lot more positive. Anyway, campsite in Norfolk. So we've gone from a large, multi-million pound contracts with the likes of McDonald's, Coca-Cola, large corporate guys producing their cups, bottles, branded merchandise, to, without being disrespectful, a small campsite in Norfolk, really quite big ends of the spectrum there. They actually wanted a general input in how do we just make sure we're reducing as much waste in the campsite as possible. And one of the things they were big on is that they had, or they have and had, static tents. Now, I don't know if any of you are campers or glampers. The static tents need replacing every year. And the canvases, you're not talking the tents you'd nip down to go outdoors and buy for a few £100s. These static tents, the canvases are heavyweight, very durable, but they perish. And you're talking thousands of pounds, and it just goes in landfill. So one of the solutions they have installed is a number of shepherd huts, and I'm calling them shepherd huts, static buildings made of sustainable resources. They don't have the ongoing maintenance costs now for that business. They're not chucking, I don't even know what the canvases are made, some form of plastic, obviously, at some point when it's broken down, into landfill. Very simple saving. They don't have electricity points in those huts on purpose because they want to encourage people not to. I spent nearly 2 days on site before they came out with, oh, by the way, we're an old water mill that hasn't ever been operational. And it's like, this is kind of mind blowing. So those pictures there are the real pictures of the mill. That's now been restored at a very, very small cost. And they did look at a hydro solution in terms of power and energy. They would have powered the village, quite frankly, with the power that would have been generated, but the cost of that was not realistic. It was, 6-figure sum for a campsite. That's going to take some time to recover. But what they have done with the restoration of the mill, they have 5 very large lakes on this site, which were suffering from blanket weed, and they were losing I can't speak. They were pushing away nature. So, the animals, the wildlife, they were moving up, they got fed up, a bit like when you live on a rough estate, you move on to a better one, I guess, to some extent. That's what the animals were doing. So, but what they were able to do with the water mill, that now powers aeration systems within the lakes that keeps the blanket weed away, which is attracting wildlife back. And there's some fascinating, I'm not a bird lover in that sense, but just within the 2 days, the range of wildlife that I saw, there were otters in and out of the lakes, birds, so they're actually promoting, and nutrient pollution. They're actually tackling that as much as reducing their carbon footprint. And they did also install some, so the lighting around the site, solar powered lighting, and not just kind of like your fairy lights I'm talking, but actual almost like stadium type lighting, which is now solar powered. So again, some really good examples. Any questions before I carry on? No. Even accountants can be focusing on how to reduce their carbon footprint. So again, the initial request, Andy, how can we reduce our electricity bills? Can we get solar panels on the roof, please? Da, 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 da. Yes, you probably can, but why are you using it in the first place? Da, 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 da. You can kind of get a theme here in terms of the approach. But one of the things for these particular, this was an accountancy practice that wants to be transacting digitally, yet the amount of paper that they were printing unnecessarily and producing, even from client sign up, so not just the operational producing the accounts, was phenomenal. So with my magic, calculated the cost to the business of that paper, let alone the inefficiencies and the productivity gains that come with it, introduced an IT solution, no paper. And that's taken 6 months to become entirely paperless, but they have got there. They're also able to take on, well, they've taken on 200% in terms of the volume of clients without recruitment, which so again, in demonstrating the growth and the productivity and the output of the business. In addition to that, this business was one that was investing in a new premises, 2-story building, and the second story they were planning to, or have made into, a cohabiting space. So initially they were going to have lots of breakout rooms, lots of roomed off with heating solutions, air conditioning units, following a simple, actually, do you know what, an open space is going to be much more efficient and effective to heat. And do you know what, you don't really need to heat it because heat rises. But they've also created that cohabiting space for no end of businesses. I'm not going to give numbers away, so I have to be careful, that now locate themselves there, so they are not having an additional footprint in terms of their businesses. So again, just to bring to life some really simple examples of thinking differently. This business are going to install solar panel energy solutions as well. That's not us. We kind of pinpoint them to other people in that sense. This is another example of a business as well, weren't able to, or weren't measuring their energy consumption. This practice, accountancy practice, actually went one step further and monitored the use by each desktop and laptop that they had. So they actually replaced a significant number of laptops that were essentially just charging consistently because they were old, being brutally honest, and the batteries were dead. But what that meant was they were constantly charging, which, well, that's a drain on electricity. So actually by updating their equipment, they're also achieving efficiency gains. So if you've got an old laptop, there you go, there's an excuse to go and buy a new one. Other examples, I purposely tried to demonstrate here a variety of business types and range of business types that actually typically approach us with the same request. So to kind of prove it. So this particular business, again, Norfolk-based business. So these are all local businesses, by the way, all in East Anglia. Andy, can you help us reduce our energy bills? Boom, boom, boom. We're using too much. It's costing too much. It's typically well, yes, it is, but you should be doing it for the right reasons anyway. So they provide telephony and internet services to lots of businesses nationally, so not just across the East Anglia, but nationally. And one of the things that the review led to with these guys is, through going through the business and their processes, kind of warts and all, they had a really, really high engineer and installation cost, which comes with, guess what, a lot of mileage, and we all know what comes out of those big dirty old vans. Not good stuff. So by getting them to think differently and asking a few questions, why do you need to install it? Why can't you design a product that is it can be installed by the customers themselves? And it's quite a techie product, so I'm purposely not going into it because I will get it wrong and get it. But essentially, most of us now, most of the larger companies now, Sky TVs, you see their products now, they're evolving. So you don't have a Sky dish anymore. You've got, they've recently just released a new, it looks like a little Wi-Fi box essentially, which is your Sky TV. So there's not even any cables anymore. So I think, encouraging businesses to think, how can you use technology to save reduce your carbon footprint, and not just in terms of, so what they've actually been able to do here by designing that new product, they've switched suppliers. So they had a supply chain to provide a product which had huge distribution costs. It wasn't even coming from the UK. So again, in terms of the scope 1, 2, 3 impact of their businesses, they're beginning to understand, actually, it's not just about what we do here, it's about what we do over there and over there that actually we influence and can control as well. So that new product is cheaper, cleaner to install, it's supplied locally, so they haven't got the knock-on impacts of that, and it's actually given them business growth, because as a result of that new product, they're able to look at different software solutions and different packages that they can continue to offer to their customers. So again, another really good success story. And most of these case studies that I'm sharing, guys, and this is kind of the reason for it, are not huge. These are businesses that are not investing huge amounts of capital. The capital investment that these guys are doing or considering is the bit after us, if you like, once they know and they've prioritized what's the right thing to do. I've skipped over one and I can't see it because it's one of my, there it is. I'm going backwards, sorry, because this was my favorite one and I skipped over it on, what's going on with the slides? There we go, boom, that's the right one. And it's only because I was looking for the little graphic, which I like, but anyway. So this is you can probably guess the name of this one. So it's an extremely large food distributor based in Norfolk. They distribute fresh fruit, fresh produce across East Anglia. So they're not constrained to services in Norfolk, but that's where they're based. So they have had and still are, I believe, in the process of a successful grant application to implement vehicle cowling on their fleet of vehicles. And for those that don't know what that is, basically think Formula One, think the sexy wings that make them really fast. Well, it's similar things for lorries that basically make them more efficient in terms of they can increase their miles per gallon and reduce their fuel costs. Again, focus on that, reduce their fuel costs. That's why they're doing it, to reduce their fuel costs, not to improve their carbon footprint. So we really challenge them on that. And it does actually reduce their carbon footprint marginally, but not great. So one of the things that I picked up with this business is, okay, brilliant. Where do your vehicles drive? Boom. What's your process? How do you plan a route for a vehicle? Where are they driving to? Upon that analysis, 90% of their customer base was in Cambridge. Why are you based in Norwich? You can guess where I'm going. So actually what that actually meant was, they are still progressing with the vehicle cowling solution because it is a good thing to do, much as I joke about it. They've actually reconsidered the fundamental location strategy of the business. Because do you know what? If we have a smaller site or a secondary site in Cambridge or closer to that, we don't even need the vehicles on the road in the first place. So they've shifted their whole mindset by thinking differently about it. But again, using data and information that's available within their business, we ask them perhaps sometimes some awkward questions, some challenging questions to get them thinking differently. In addition to that, this particular business have had a particular way of pricing to customers that's been in existence for nearly 30 years. So when I asked them, how much does a box of apples make you? They had no idea. Or they did have an idea. They told me a number and I said, that's completely wrong because you haven't got your distribution costs in there. You haven't got the costs of actually waste in there, so on and so forth. So they've actually completely redone their pricing model. So again, by focusing on their carbon footprint, being more efficient, they've actually increased their profit margin as well. So that's why I wanted to share that one, because there are so many wider benefits to it. But if we focus on the right things and processes and the carbon footprint measures and the right measures, the business benefits kind of take care of themselves. So I'm going to stop sharing because I don't like the slides and I can't see people. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. That I will send the rest of the slides out, which include Mike's and Maya's contact details if you have any questions. But essentially, I think the key message for me is take some steps, even if they're small, and don't be afraid to engage with some specialists like the advisors the Growth Hub provide and others, because they may ask you some awkward questions. But actually, well, I will ask you questions. I don't mind saying it. But the output for your business is, we're not doing it to be awkward or to be bloody minded or to be negative. We're here to help. And you can see from some of those examples there, I could have put, hundreds of examples on there. Not quite hundreds, tens of examples on there. I wish I could put hundreds of examples on there. Tens of examples on there of different businesses from different sectors, but hopefully you can kind of see a common theme coming out. So, we've reduced the carbon footprint of those businesses, but in addition to that, there's been genuine business growth at the same time without huge investment. And I think that, for me, that's a really important message, because a lot of business owners, if we're being brutally honest, are focusing on how can I save money, or it might reduce my carbon footprint. Actually don't. Do the opposite, and the financial performance of the business will take care of itself if you're doing the right things. Mic drop questions, please. And any questions, any thoughts?
I was just going to ask everyone, Andy, if that's okay. How many guys on here, how many of you guys have already started measuring your carbon footprint? Have you started that process or thinking about it at the moment? Hands up.
Come off mute, guys. Please come off mute.
Yep.
Jay has. Did Tony say you had? Yeah.
Yes, but unfortunately, it wasn't a positive result.
No, okay.
Travel a long way to go to work, basically 75 miles.
Okay.
When we went online, I could deliver what I do from home, right, which was great. So it's very nice for me. I was saving 3 hours, possibly 4 hours traveling a day, not getting tired, being refreshed, walked down to the bottom of the garden, got my own office, could deliver everything from there. But that didn't last long, because a lot of companies don't trust their employees. That's what I found.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I said, well, I was in a very good position that I didn't need to carry on doing that. But a lot of people, unfortunately, haven't got that option.
Yeah, no, agree. But the point being that, and you said you measured it, but it wasn't a very positive outcome. Okay, what you've done though, the positive outcome is you've started measuring it. And I think this is where, like Andy said, we talk to businesses and we go in and we say, right, okay, we'll get a benchmark of where you are. And there's plenty of tools. Jay, I don't know if you found this experience, but there's plenty of tools online. You benchmark and then you can measure going forward. Now, yes, what you found there, Tony, is great. You could work from home yourself, but other businesses can't always do that. But at least you've started that process as a business, whether it's your business or the one that says some people can work at home, some can't, or we want them in the office. You've got to start somewhere. So it's just interesting to see how many had started measuring. Jay, what was your experience of measuring your output?
Yeah, so it was a question we were being asked by a lot of clients around whole carbon footprint and such like.
Yeah.
We were a little bit stuck as to where to go. To be fair,
okay.
Initially, we worked with Innovate UK, who were very helpful in terms of giving a little bit of structure to it. Mm-hmm. But what really kicked it into touch for us was we had a request from one of our large customers for an EcoVadis survey, which kind of probably brought the whole thing to life more than anything. And with Innovate UK, they suggested we went back to our biggest year, so it's a pre-COVID year, 2019, as our benchmark, and so we can look. And I think initially it was hard to pull everything together, and of course you've got various scopes that need to go through. Some are easier than others, and it's a little bit to get your head around. But once You definitely have to get your finance team on board with providing the data. And as soon as you get them on board, it helps a lot. But yeah, making a start is probably the key thing. But then whilst you're doing that, definitely put your system in place to make the next years easier.
Just
Things our experience.
I'll bring Ellen in a minute because she's politely got her hand up, which is great. But yeah, I think Jay, you just said a couple of things in there which we see regularly as well. The data is important, it's critical. You can't do it without the data. So are the people. And you mentioned the finance team on board. I would probably go one step further and get everybody on board. And I know by the nature of what I do, continuous improvement, install. If you've been in large corporates where they have a program and simplified service, or it'll have some badge name. Essentially, it's cutting costs across the business by deploying continuous improvement. Well, that requires buy-in from everybody, and it only works, and businesses are only successful in doing that if they take everybody along that journey. Well, net zero is no different. Ultimately, it should start, I call it grassroots, start at grassroots and filter all the way through the business. And that's drastically important. If you've got everybody on board, you won't have as many issues collecting or finding the data as you would if you don't, because they'll see it as a nuisance over and above the day job. Ellen, sorry, you had a question. Been very polite, sorry, and patient.
It wasn't a question, it was more of an observation about us measuring our carbon footprint as an organisation. So the Local Enterprise Partnership has 55 employees, and I suppose my gut feeling before we measured our carbon footprint was that business mileage would be our big footprint, or biggest chunk of our footprint. We're predominantly office based. We've got a reasonable boiler and renewable energy, electricity and stuff, but actually when we run the numbers, and this what Tony's point really suggested to me, is that actually commuting would double our business mileage, and it's not something I'd ever even thought of. And I think COVID, what it's taught us, so our footprint came down by nearly 70% when COVID hit, which is great. It's gone back up a bit now because we understand as a business there are some elements that do have that face-to-face interaction, but our leadership team are really on board, and they know we can be productive now without being in the office all the time. So they've given us that flexibility to make those decisions. That's not to say that we don't sometimes go in, because we absolutely do, and if it's required by the business we do, but we've now got that information to tell us what that is doing, what that impact is. And you're completely right that actually, unless you know that, how can you even make those decisions?
Yeah, that's a good shout. And Tony was right. I was working with an accountancy firm down here in Essex at the start of lockdown, and they were really scared about letting people work from home, and that trust element was really, really difficult. But when we actually looked, 6 months later at the productivity, and it's sustainable. How long is this going to be sustained for? But the initial productivity of people working from home was actually that much higher, because they didn't have what the Americans call the water cooler discussions, or whatever they call it. You didn't have that social interaction, and people felt guilty working at home. They felt they had to give extra time. So, but again, that does wane over a period. I've been a home worker, I guess, since early 2000s. But I'm used to that. But it is a trust thing, and it's quite difficult. It was quite difficult for businesses to change that. But interestingly, actually, I started measuring my carbon footprint about a year ago. Set a benchmark. Of course, since I've been working on this net zero project, my carbon footprint's gone like that, because guess what? I can't do everything I do on Zoom. I have to go on site. So that is a little bit of a bizarre negative point in this, but I minimize that, and what I'm delivering is delivering carbon benefits. So you have to do some of it. You can't entirely do everything from home.
Susan, you get your hand up.
Can I?
Hi, sorry for being
Sorry,
late.
I'll come to you after, Jackie. Sorry for being late.
Okay, sorry for being late to the meeting. A bit of a problem with the password. I just thought I'd just say what we were doing. I think the college has probably been measuring its footprint for about 10 years, but really it's been focused on scope 1 and 2. Yeah. We have had a heat decarb plan developed with the energy consultant, but of course, one of the major things is trying to get defunct gas boilers over to air source heat pumps, and we're in the middle of we've applied for a SALIX grant, and that's all being looked at the moment. But I mean, I don't know if anyone's done any of these applications. They're extremely intensive things to do, and probably require quite a lot of specialisms that you might not always have to hand. So fingers crossed on that. But I mean, obviously the air source heat pumps are very expensive, and actually, of course, electricity is more expensive than gas. So obviously we hope to sort of combine that with insulation and new transformers, etc. But it's like mega money. You're talking like sort of spending best part of £700,000 developing a building and trying to get grants of 450 grand and having to put 250 grand in yourself. I mean, in a college environment, that is a difficult ask.
That's a big commitment,
I mean, and actually, probably like you say, I mean, our actually footprint has gone down, or they haven't completely measured it properly for this year, but that's been mainly because of your carbon factors that go down, don't they? Because the UK has got more renewable energy, and if you use the sort of market-based approach, then it goes down. So our energy actually, of course, went up, because obviously trying to run a college during COVID, all the ventilation rates had to go up, and weren't allowed to recirculate the air. And I'm not sure we've quite put those back to where they were, because it's quite a big decision to say, oh, you're almost saying COVID's over. And that's quite, which obviously isn't quite true. You don't want the college to close down with all people being off ill. So ventilation rates, have been high, and, not being able to use thermal wheels, etc. like that. Yeah. So, we have got an energy data management system that we're trying to populate. So that, because the problem is you can have like an electricity meter that serves several buildings, so you don't actually know exactly what's going. Say you've got 30 buildings across your estate or something, you don't actually know what's going in. So yeah, we're trying, but there's a lot of work. But this is a lot of work to do, and you're right, behavioural change is part of that, and getting sort of senior leadership team and middle management involved, so that it's not like, oh, Sue's the environment officer, Sue can do everything to do with the environment, because guess what, I can't.
And Tony will probably know more about this than I do. It's the technology is moving on so quickly as well, and you start down this route. You've been going down that route for a number of years, and if you're moving from gas boilers to heat pumps, I have conversations with gas engineers who start talking about hydrogen and hydrogen mix, and actually gas it won't be too far down the route, and they'll be putting 20% hydrogen in our gas mix, ultimately with a view to being a greater percentage of hydrogen. So what's the best technology to invest in now? Who knows? We don't really know. And that also muddies the water. And we've seen, ever since solar panels were first talked about from a domestic point of view, they've changed in efficiency and the way they work. And and it just, where do you start that investment? It's a big commitment, and you're talking big chunks of money, and a lot of small businesses really need to go through that efficiency process first before they jump into that commitment to capital investment, which has its place in the right business at the right time. But it's an interesting one. It's a challenge, and we're all being pushed on it. But there are resources to help. I mean, yes, we talk to a lot of micro and very small businesses. Just start measuring scope 1 and 2. Even if you start there, you're starting the process, and then you can start thinking about, well, what is my scope 3? Where does that fit? How do I work into that? And you'll get forced down that route, like you said, Jay, because contractually someone wanted you to do that. And we're finding that we tender for business, and we're being asked for sustainability policies and evidence of our net zero policy, etc. So you sort of get forced into that route.
Yeah, and rightly so on that point. Susan, just so you know, just before we come across to Jackie, Ellen's put some detail in the chat for you. For those that might have seen it, around support. We'll hang on a bit after for a little bit if there's any questions. Jackie, sorry, you had your,
I was sort of just going from what everyone else has said, but which is also the truth. I mean, first of all, you do need to measure, and you need to measure accurately, because you need to know what your baseline is to be able to measure your improvements. I mean, sometimes people say, oh, well, can't we just, change? And you can then quantify what you've saved, but you can't quantify that as a proportion of what your footprint was in the first place. But the other thing is, everything's so interlinked. So with the home working, as you said, and as Tony said, you know, he worked from home, and there are all these, and that's great. Productivity went up, but then there are the social impacts of people working at home, which are also interlinked. So you can't really look at one thing in isolation without it affecting everything else. And as you said, Andy, you know, initially businesses come to you for money, because that is what business is there to really achieve, and actually trying to turn that on its head and make it into a creative process about, okay, how do all these things affect each other, and if we follow them all down their little lines, how can you make more money? That's really what you're saying to them, isn't it? But don't set out with that in mind. I didn't really have a specific question, but yeah.
No, it's spot on, and I know, you know, I've done what I'm doing for 30 years at varying degrees of complexity and experience, but you know, and this is about as sexy as I can make processes. Okay, guys, is if you focus on your processes and measure your process output, and measure processes in the way customers measure processes in terms of your business, the benefits are going to happen. They take care of themselves. And you know, I do quite a bit of training on Lean Six Sigma training, and a really good example, simple example. If I was, you know, let's pretend for a moment we have a car accident. Most of us drive. It's not a fatal accident, don't worry. You know, but if I was to ask you, where does that insurance claim start for you as a customer in terms of repair? Well, it's probably when the accident happens. You've had an accident. You're without your car. Where does it start for the insurance company? Well, when you tell them about it, and there could be days, weeks in between those two periods alone. And then similarly, back in, where does that process end for you as a customer? Well, when you've got money in your bank, or you've got your car back on the road, whichever it may be. Where does it end for the insurance company? Well, when they've recovered their money off a third party, which always happens in some shape or form or another. That could be years. So two views of the process from a customer's perspective could be 10 days. From an internal perspective could be a year. It isn't a different process. It's the same process, looking at it from different perspectives. And I would encourage everyone, and I'm going to say that because it's what I do, but do that to yourselves and do that to your clients, and that you will identify carbon reduction opportunities, you'll identify improvement, productivity and efficiency opportunities, and the two go hand in hand. And it really is, it isn't always easy to do. Like, I'm not saying that it is. You don't just wave magic wand and it happens, but it's achievable for everybody if they want to. Sorry, I think I cut something.
Can I just say something, hopefully not too provocative?
That's okay.
But do you think we've got enough time? And by time, I don't mean us as individuals, I mean us as a society, especially when we're looking at COP27 and some of the statements that are being made. And when I talk to young people, you know, my children and grandchildren, they don't think we're doing enough. And when I say they and us, I mean our generation of the boomers that have had it very good. But what I'm afraid of, what we're leaving to the next generations is not very good. I think we've got to look at ourselves, people in quite prominent positions, and we're not stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, totally. I can't answer that. Are we doing well? You know, are we doing it too late? Do we have enough time? I don't know. Are we doing enough? I'll be even more controversial. Ellen knows me, so she knows. No, we're not. Absolutely, no, we're not. And we, being collectively, for me, and this might be extremely controversial, I want to see government tax carbon.
Yes,
that will focus the minds on people for sure. Will everyone moan about it? Another tax, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but that's the kind of course of action, in my opinion, that we need. Otherwise, you know, that we probably all know businesses and clients and friends that aren't even thinking about measuring their footprint, don't care, because it's like, oh, that's 5 years from now. No, it should have been 5 years ago. You know, I'm with you, Tony. I completely support you on that.
I mean, when you watch the news and you see what's happening in Pakistan, places in the world, you know, they're really in big, deep trouble. we're relatively well off, and we can do so much more in the developed West.
There is a bit of a problem. There is a bit of a problem, Tony, in that we need, people to say, right, we need electric vehicles, but they don't want the 40-acre solar farm that is needed to drive grid serve, for example. They don't want nuclear power, and if we're going to convert everybody to an electric vehicle, we're going to need nuclear power. And look how long it takes to make a decision to get Sizewell C off the ground. This is part of the problem. We are too bureaucratic, and we are, on one hand, we want everything right, but we don't want to live with the consequences of getting it right. And so it's a circle we'll never properly connect up, in my view. But
just one further thing: the power is moving from the West to Asia. There's no doubt about it. I mean, when you look at the issues that are going off in the Middle East and so on, I know I'm being a bit political, but I mean, that is all part of the system.
Oh, I'm gonna try and
anyway
kill that one off. Helen, great timing. Put your hand up.
We've got 4 minutes till 1 o'clock. That's when we're due to finish. Just a few observations about those final points. I think there is always more that we can do as individuals, collective individuals at any geography and at any scale. And we all know that. And I think behavior change, in my opinion, is going to be the hardest nut to crack. The technology is there. There will be ways to pay for that in the future, but actually changing people's hearts and minds is the way that we're going to get this done. And there will be that it has to happen. We have to do something, and we have to do it quickly. So I guess that would be my observation, given where we find ourselves at the moment. I think just want to say a huge thank you to Andy and Mike today, and everybody for joining us at today's webinar. Jackie, I'll introduce you to Andy in terms of getting email contacts. I'll do that now. And just a massive thank you. If you're interested in joining any of our other webinars, please feel free. Like I say, Andy's got another one next week on Wednesday, but we're also doing one on green finance and supply chain and ESG next week as well. We've also got an in-person event happening on Tuesday. Andy will be there. I've seen you on my list, Andy. So if you want, pardon?
Yeah, probably be there as well, I should imagine. Yeah.
So feel free to join us then too. We also have a little bit of free consultancy left if you're a business in Suffolk. I don't think many of you are, but if you are a business in Suffolk, we have a little bit of consultancy left. So if you wanted a bit more of Andy's time, then that might be an option. So please do get in touch. But I guess for now, I just want to say a massive thank you to you all, and hopefully see you all soon.
And Ellen, sorry, just quickly, will you share this? I know
we will get the recording and the slides shared. Yes, that's fine. We'll get that.
They have got contact details in for people, and
perfect.
I've actually put in a link to all the webinars, even though some of them happened. But yeah, just feel free to send them. There's no issues.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you all.
College choir.
Thank you.
Lovely.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks. Do you want me to stay here to do emails, or will you do email?
Oh, whatever you want to do. That's whatever's easiest. It's much easier just for you to do it now.
I have sent you a connection on LinkedIn.
Oh, brilliant. All right. Well, we're done.
My email's public on there. So
perfect.
yeah.
Great. Thanks very much. That was great. Okay.
Thanks, Jackie.